Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So the 2024 election has come to a close. Republicans won the presidency. Donald Trump making his epic comeback with a 312 electoral vote victory as well as a popular vote victory. Also, Republicans will end up with 53 seats in the Senate. It is true that Bob Casey just cannot give up, but I do believe McCormick is going to win at the end of the day. If this was like between 1,000 votes, we know they'd find 1,000, but they can't exactly do that. So they're trying these long shot lawsuits, which again, Republicans have won that same lawsuit a couple of times. So we'll keep an eye on that. But as of right now, it's very, very likely that Republicans will end up with 53 seats in the Senate. Missed opportunity. It should be more, but I digress. That's still a majority where you don't have to rely on Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins to be a deciding vote. So out of the gate, you end up with a Republican House as well and a Republican Senate. So you have a trifecta. And Republicans officially, they projected 218. Does seem like they're going to take Iowa's first. They're probably going to flip Alaska, and you do have a couple seats left out there in California that very well could end up going Republican. They probably end up with around 220, 221 seats when it's all said and done. So it's true that Republicans have a trifecta. The question is, yeah, we understand we have a couple years before the midterms, but it's never too late to start asking the question, can they hold that trifecta in the midterms? And obviously, I can't give a yes or no answer just yet, but I can say that the answer in terms of do they have an ability to, the answer is yes, especially when it comes down to the Senate. I kind of wanted to go over the midterms a little bit, preview them very briefly in this video. Is there a shot that Donald Trump can protect his legacy, possibly even increase the Republican majority so he's able to not just be a lame duck president during his last 2 years? I've said the answer is indeed yes, and I'll show you guys why. So we have to go back to 2018. And this was the first midterm under Trump. Democrats won big. There were several reasons why Democrats won so many seats. They flipped 40 seats on net. Republicans lost about 40 seats on net. And the main reason why that was is because, A, Republicans held seats in places that they just had no business holding seats in. We're talking about places in suburban Philadelphia and the places that are not exactly Trump friendly. We're talking about, certain places in Virginia that have moved left off a cliff, suburban Atlanta, you name it, just all around. There were a lot of Republican seats that they were able to hold on in 2016, but they were not able to hold on in 2018 just because of the fact that you have this energy. And that brings us to number two, is the Democrats had the energy factor mainly because of the fact that Paul Ryan just completely botched the healthcare reform. That is another big thing. It is true Trump was president. Usually incumbent presidents do see this wave against him. Trump did have an approval rating in the mid-40s. That's very true. But also a lot of this was also on the shoulders of House Republicans. And that's kind of what we saw back in 2018 with Paul Ryan. Now you don't have Paul Ryan. You have Mike Johnson. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about Mike Johnson. I myself have mixed feelings about Mike Johnson, but one thing I will say is that Trump does seem to get along with him very well, unlike Paul Ryan, where they were, always feuding on the campaign trail. And Mike Johnson's main issue under the Biden administration is the guy is just too nice, so he'll capitulate. Well, if he does the same thing to Trump, where he's, very friendly to Trump in many cases, it's like, yeah, I think he could be a solid speaker, not a perfect speaker, but a decent speaker. And then on the Republican Senate side, you do have John Thune as Senate Majority Leader. I'm not a fan of John Thune. He has a lot to prove. If he can get some of these appointments through, even some of the more controversial appointments through, he's definitely going to prove to be, off to a solid start. It doesn't mean he's going to finish in a solid position. But one thing I will say is that regardless, you'd rather have the current Congress than that Congress, even though the majority is slimmer, just because, if you look at the Republican majority, Like, look at some of these individuals. Barbara Comstock, for example, how much money did they spend trying to protect her in 2018? Barbara Comstock voted for Kamala Harris. There were so many Republicans that made up that majority in 2017 that actually ended up voting for Kamala Harris, not even like abstaining, but voting for Harris. Like, that is insane. Like, this is a new party. It's Donald Trump's party. And in terms of what Republicans need to do in order to go out there and make sure that they can make 2026 like a reverse 2022, is they need to capitalize on that. I will say that Trump is not, in my opinion, unless there's some major botched policy thing, he's not going to be as unpopular as he was in his first term among the general public, because nobody is listening to the mainstream media anymore. They do not have the grip over the populace, and it's at a point where even they are like firing people, possibly even thinking about hiring some more like Trump-friendly people, because they realize the way they've been doing business is indeed bad for business. And they're just in complete and total disarray right now. They don't know how to pick up the pieces from the election, and they understand that the Overton window is indeed moving, and it's not exactly moving in their favor. So a second-term Trump probably out of the gate's going to be more popular, because you do have decentralized media. A lot more people are not listening to the mainstream media. They're getting their information from podcasts, etc., and that's true. Another thing is the ground game, which was non-existent for Republicans in 2022. So if Trump is able to kind of maintain a stable level of popularity, just like how Biden was unpopular, you're going to have to get these people out to the polls to vote in a midterm year. Democrats really struggled with turnout in the 2010s during this, but they actually got their act together ahead of 2018. Could Republicans possibly keep up the momentum and get their act together ahead of 2026? That's absolutely on the table. And also the Senate map is relatively solid for Republicans. They're likely not going to lose the Senate. We'll get to the maps in a minute. Same thing with the governorships. They may actually gain net governorships. That's not going to necessarily be a guarantee. But in terms of the House, because a lot of people are saying, well, he'd need the House, that's where everything is going to begin. Well, it is true that Republicans lost a lot of close races this year, even with Trump on the ballot. They don't have the most efficient map. A lot of Democrats have complained for a very, very long time about this notion of gerrymandering, but then you look at states like New York, Illinois, California, you name it, Republicans are getting like 40% or above of the vote in those places. They're not getting anywhere near 40% of the seats in those states. Meanwhile, Republicans are, in many cases, obviously you have Texas and Florida, but there's many states where they're not really, willing to lift a finger to change that. But I will say that you can indeed have mid-decade redistricting in Ohio, in North Carolina, maybe bring some cases again before the Supreme Court in Louisiana, Alabama, where they're basically handing out free districts unconstitutionally to the Democrats on a silver platter. That's a major, major problem. And then obviously they're going to have to find solid candidates to run in some of these districts in places like Nevada, places, in California. Can they flip back some of those seats that they've lost this cycle? It's entirely possible, depending on trends, depending on Trump's popularity. But the House, I would say Democrats have this opportunity to retake it. I do believe that if Donald Trump maintains a solid level of popularity, though, we very well could be in for like a reverse 2022, which is technically not the end of the world, but still, they do have a path to protect the House in 2026. And I will say that if Donald Trump does maintain a decent level of popularity, he can go, resume rallies, protect his legacy, do what he has to do. At that point, yeah, it's very possible they could maintain the House. It just depends on what Trump's popularity level is going to be. But like I said, it's probably going to be above where it was in his first term. If he's able to, get a lot of his promises fulfilled, like no taxes on overtime, etc. If he's able to extend the tax bill, if he's not, going to touch any third rails on healthcare, then he probably could be in a decent position to do it. We'll just have to wait and see. But also that mid-decade redistricting is going to play a huge role if Republicans are able to do it, because that could net them like 5 to 10 seats, and it's going to make things a hell of a lot harder for Democrats out of the gate to retake the House. And now we know also What's important to note is the Senate map, because in terms of the House, it seems like that might be the hardest task for Republicans to hold, but the Senate is very easy. In fact, they have 53 seats now. It's very possible that they're going to end up with more. It seems like Ohio, that's going to be a special election. We don't know who will be appointed yet, but I do believe it's probably going to be a hold. I think that you may see DeWine appoint Frank LaRose to that Senate seat. Either way, it doesn't seem like Ohio's a state that's going to really elect a Democrat senator anytime soon regardless. Also, the state of Florida, Marco Rubio nominated for Secretary of State. It's very possible DeSantis just appoints somebody who's going to be there for 2 years and runs for that seat himself. Either way, Florida is pretty much a safe red state now. We'll see what happens in some of these other seats, like will Chris Sununu run up in New Hampshire? It's unlikely, but we'll have to wait and see. But that could be a competitive race there. Republicans are probably going to hold states like Iowa, Kansas, Texas, Alaska. Michigan might be a tough flip because Republicans don't have very much of a bench in Michigan. Susan Collins in Maine has said she will run for re-election. That's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. I know a lot of people have talked about primarying Susan Collins, but Maine is a state where you're not going to really elect anyone better than Susan Collins. I will say that we should be trying to primary out some of these rhinos. I would start in places like South Carolina with Lindsey Graham, Texas with John Cornyn, because you actually will be able to win those races with those primary challengers, whereas Susan Collins up in Maine, you'd basically be just handing Democrats a free seat. Might feel good for a day, but Collins is rarely that tie-breaking vote anyways, and she has come through at times like we see with Supreme Court appointments, so not really a fan of hers, but it's Maine. If she was senator of, I don't know, like, let's just say Wisconsin, yeah, I'd say primary her out with somebody better that's capable of winning. And North Carolina, Roy Cooper might go for it. I still think Tillis very well can beat him. Same thing with the state of Georgia. Brian Kemp likely to go for that Senate race. We'll see what happens there. Not really the biggest fan of him, but can he beat John Ossoff? Yes, he can. We'll see if anybody else runs for it. If somebody better who's also viable can win a primary and a general runs, have to look into that one as well. But it does seem as if, midterm years, you don't see very high black turnout in these specific states. That usually helps Republicans. You saw that in 2018 when Republicans won the House popular vote in North Carolina, where Republicans held the governorship in Georgia despite Stacey Abrams operating at her peak performance. She still ended up losing by 2 points and then decided to deny the results of her election. So either way, when you look at the Senate, it seems like Republicans, even if they have a bad year, they're still going to hold the Senate. They even have a possibility to have a net gain of one. I don't know who Democrats are going to run against Susan Collins, but I still think she probably ends up holding on just because Maine is Maine. And if Jared Golden wants to run for that seat, then his House seat very likely does end up flipping into the Republican column. So it would be a little bit of a trade-off there. But in terms of the governorships, Republicans do have some opportunities. I think, Pennsylvania is going to be a really tough task for sure. It is very possible Katie Hobbs could go down in Arizona. She's not popular. If Evers goes for a third term governors, they don't necessarily always have the greatest track record. I know Scott Walker lost to Evers in his third term. If there's a solid Republican candidate that could go for that seat, maybe Eric Hovde might be able to run a competitive race there. I think Republicans will end up holding Georgia. I think Burt Jones would be a great upgrade over Brian Kemp there, and he's the lieutenant governor already, so he might be able to go for that. He could win that seat, hold that seat for the Republicans there down in Georgia. I think Republicans probably, you could make the case they'll hold New Hampshire. But in terms of some of these other flips, like Michigan's going to be a tough haul just because of the fact that Democrats do have a strong, notable bench there and Republicans don't. So either way, when we look at our current election, Donald Trump with a victory, that is great. He has a trifecta. Can they protect that in 2026? The answer is yes. Will they? The House is a little bit of a tough haul. Just depends on certain circumstances. I do believe they're very, very likely to hold the Senate, and they honestly will have a really good shot at flipping a gubernatorial race or two. So we got to make sure we keep up the momentum. We make 2026 a reverse 2022 at worst for the Republicans, but hopefully a reverse 2022, but we actually are able to hold the House in this case. So is that going to be possible? We'll see, but it's up to Donald Trump. And if he's able to go in there, fulfill his promises, he's going to be a hell of a lot more popular than he was in term one, just because the cultural landscape has done a complete and total 180. So it's very possible. We got to get these people out. But we got 2 years to work on this. So anyways, guys, make sure you like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.